Hello, Rose. How are you?
So, good afternoon. Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us.
Yes, it's Tuesday, it's lunchtime, and it's time for the Healing Through Love show. Welcome. We're here to increase awareness within the community about providing family and domestic violence survivors with a soft place to land and to offer advice on services available to these survivors and their families.
And thank you, Charlene. And as well as the Healing Through Love show, we hold annual pamper days for survivors in South Australia and in Tasmania, where local businesses pay it forward to give our survivors a much needed day of relaxation and joy. And each week, also on this show, we interview experts and survivors who share their personal experiences and share advice on uh, share their advice to, those who have experienced abuse, no matter where you are on your journey.
Thank you. And don't go too far, Rose, because at the end, let's jump back on and talk about our upcoming event in Tasmania and also our event that we've got planned for next year.
Absolutely.
So today we've got a very special guest. Rose is going to the back of house to do all the things that are required to make the show happen. She's producing the show today. Today we've got an amazing guest, Jenny Lee. Jenny Lee Keez is a survivor of a 9-year lived experience of anorexia nervosa and many more enduring things, migraines, OCD, chronic fatigue, depression, suicide, you name it. It was all a challenge for her. She had sexual abuse, she had schoolyard bullying, and all sorts of things happened to make Jenny Lee the person that she is today. Now, some time ago, Jenny Lee, I think she was 35, met a woman who was practicing a reality therapy underpinned by choice therapy. And that's where she made some massive breakthroughs and enabled her to move forward to be the person that she is today. Jenny Lee is the author of an amazing book, and we're going to talk about that book today. Jenny Lee, welcome to Healing Through Love show.
Thank you, Charlene. I've really been looking forward to this. We had to abandon it back in March, so here we are in July, finally giving us the opportunity to share this morning. Thank you so much, or over lunch, I should say.
Well, over a cup of tea at least, because I'm good, Jenny Lee, but I'm just not that good. Hey, it's been a privilege and a pleasure, and hasn't it been some very interesting times for us in Australia and just globally? And we have had to be so flexible and agile with business on a daily basis just to keep moving forward. So thank you for the ability to rebook. And today I'd really love to start our journey talking together, just sharing a little bit about your experience, what's got you to where you are, and then I'd love to ask you a few extra questions. So generally, tell me about your story that's got you to where you are today.
Well, my story began when I was a little girl. I was born onto a farm, and I had 2 other siblings at the time. Another one joined us later when we shifted. But my story really began from the moment I was born. But it really instilled in me at the age of 2. It was a Sunday morning and it was my birthday, and February the 28th, and I won't give the year, that will date me. But on that morning I had a very traumatic experience which would embed itself in me and certainly define and shape the person that I became from that moment forward. And without sharing what that was at the moment, just to keep us going, from that point on, and the effect it had on me was to become a perfectionist. I was also a minister's daughter and also born into a culture, and I really preempt this by saying this is people's lives and experience from which we can all learn. So there's no judgment, there's no blame, there's just a lot of learning that we can take from this experience. And so from that point on, I became the perfectionist. I was the one that wanted to stand out in the crowd. I was the one that felt rejected on every level. It didn't matter if people were actually accepting me. My perception was they're rejecting me anyway. And then that was sort of supported when I was 6 years old. My father decided, as I said, to join the ministry, and we came down to Adelaide for him to do the 4 years of study that involved. I went to 2 different schools and experienced a lot of bullying during those years. So I was beginning to already develop from this bright, bubbly, creative little girl into one that was very withdrawn, but constantly seeking approval as well in the behaviours that I adopted. So we then went to live at Port Macdonald for 3 years, which should have been a really highlighted time in my life because it was a wonderful environment to find myself in. However, the bullying continued, and also added was confusion. I was beginning to grow up now and beginning to be able to assess that people had different lifestyles and different ways of approaching life. And the things that I saw as punishment behaviours weren't being punished for other people. So confusion started to grow as to what does life really look like, and what can you do, what can't you do, what will you be punished for, what won't you be punished for. But I just kept that all inside of me, because why would I talk about it? I guess I was just a lonely child having different thoughts and different feelings, but not sharing them with anybody. And then at the age of 13, I shifted from there up to Kimber, and a different environment again. And for the 3 years up there, I had been a top athlete. I won everything I went in. I was a vocalist. I was a competition winner. It didn't matter what I did, I won it. I was a straight A student. All of these things that I thought as a person of that age would bring acceptance through the door. But it didn't happen. I became more and more isolated. And so at 15, it's not surprising that I then went into anorexia nervosa. Not that we knew it at the time. It didn't have a name. It didn't have a place even in medical history or anything, I don't think. So for 9 years, I then went into those behaviours, which no one questioned me about. I guess I hid most of them anyway. But I went from a strong athletic person to barely there. And no one actually asked the question until I was 24 years old. And it was at 24 that the unravelling started to happen and the questions began to happen. But as it was in my day, it was just, well, if you put on the weight, all will be forgiven, you'll be back to normal, and voila, we won't have to see you again in our consulting rooms. Well, I gradually, and with a lot of fear, began to put the weight back on. But what replaced that was chronic fatigue, debilitating migraines, suicidal depression, OCD, and an experience I call depersonalization, where you don't feel like you're on the planet or in the room. It's just this haze that seems to come and live with you and stops you from being able to fully appreciate what's going on around you, or even have any memory of what you're doing in a particular day or anything. And it was those illnesses that persisted. And so I was put onto medication, which made all of that a lot worse. And then when I'd come off it, I'd have to go through that period of detoxification. And so it was just a downhill run of life from the age of 2 until finally at 37, I did get married. I had 2 beautiful children. And at the age of 36, we had shifted again to Darwin. My life was full of shift here, shift there, shift everywhere. And I came home then as a single mum. And it was the lady that I happened across that was suggested to me, called Joan Hookstad, who practiced reality therapy underpinned by choice theory, that I went to her. You know, I'm a single mum now. How do I support my children emotionally through this change? And I seemed to have a handle on that. But she intuitively knew that she needed to ask the question of me, I want to talk about you. And of course, by this stage, I was like, I'm so over me. I'm just sick. It's not going to change. Bleh. But then I had an experience. I guess the universe intervened again, and I ended up with a girlfriend and a cup of tea, and she asked that pointed question, JL, do you think something happened when you were little that has influenced how your life has unfolded? And from being like I am now with you, Charlene, I just dived under that table in absolute fear and absolutely shook, felt like an absolute twerp in front of Vicky, and then resumed my seat, and I went, So knowing that Joan was there, back I went, and my healing began at that point, with the way that she conducted her therapy and with the way that, she just got through to me and got through to the story that was underneath, that began at the age of 2. And then went from there. That's in a nutshell.
Yes. So there you go. So what would be the lesson here for our listeners today? Would you suggest, Jenny Lee, that if you're experiencing some sort of physical discomfort or physical illness or mental challenges, that perhaps maybe they might not be the things that are happening for you right now, that in fact they could have happened in those early 7 years where we get patterned, and that you might have protected yourself by covering them up, and that perhaps maybe either NLP and, timeline therapy, or like, as you mentioned, reality therapy with a choice is an option for you to unpack what's happened for you in the past. Is that what you're saying, generally?
Yes, I would encourage listeners who are here today, if you're really, really struggling as I was, and mine unfolded just because of events in my life, and, I separated, next thing I found myself with the right person, but it was the right person at the right time who said, look, JL, I want to look at your story. I want to look at your thinking. I want to look at your behaviours. I want to look at your physical symptoms, and I want to look at your emotions, and I want to see where they came from. And where you learned that set at your values, your needs and your wants. And she brought all of those together. And most importantly, and the standout for me at the end of it all, they're all important, but were the relationships that I had in my life and how those connections had the ability to make or break me. And unfortunately, I had relationships that broke me. And that was the main learning. I needed to go back and look at what I was taught as a child as to how life works and begin to look at the damning effect that it had on me and how I developed and how I perceived and filtered the world around me. And I needed to look at whether that was true for me. Now, obviously, it wasn't true for me, or my body wouldn't have been doing everything it was doing to me. I came to learn that as bad as suicidal depression, and we'll pull that one out just as an example, suicidal depression was, when Joan said to me, JL, I want you, next time you have that experience, I want you to stop and I want you to talk to suicidal depression. I thought, far out. So on one of my nightly walks, because what used to happen for about 10 years is I'd go to bed fine, as I'm feeling now, and I'd wake about 2 in the morning and I'd be in the depth of just, how can I cut my head off, people? How can I end this? And I would get out of bed and walk around the yard and just try to work out how I could end all of this pain and suffering, and then go back to bed knowing that in the morning that was going to leave and I was going to be back to normal again, or my normal for then. So I started to ask suicidal depression, look, what is your purpose? What is your message? What are you wanting to share with me? And it was interesting, the thoughts that came. And I began, with Joan's help, to look at those thoughts and see how those thoughts and me having them as my reality affected my behaviours, therefore why I had an eating disorder, affected my emotions. Why was I depressed? Why was I chronically fatigued? What was happening up here in my brain, my storage unit, that was determining everything about my life? And so together we constructed an outcome. We began to break down the thinking. Well, that actually comes from your dad. That's how he was taught. So obviously he's going to teach it to you. But is it actually real? Is it actually true? And what do you really think? And I had to give myself permission, because as abused people, because I'll share with you now, at the age of 2, I was sexually abused. And on that morning, I went to speak from the back seat of that car to my mother and say, Mum, and just deliver it all, over from the back seat. And very quickly, my father turned around and went, whack. And at the age of 2, I was demanded out of the car to stay home, shut the internal gate. I wasn't going to church that day. So at the age of 2, I was left at home on this huge farm on my own, having had that experience. And I took that on as truth. That was my truth. If I speak about this, I'll be blamed, you'll be killed, all of those awful things, and it will all be my fault. So I have to be perfect. I have to be this, I have to be that, to avoid what will happen to me if I'm not. So we can see how that one experience, coupled with a host of other ones, this is just one of them, began to shape the world that I began to live in. So I had to break that world down and look at it. And gradually, as I said, come back to that word permission. I found it really hard to give myself permission to be different to what my upbringing had taught me. But one of the ways I did that was I began to observe people around me. I go to shopping centres and just watch people. He really likes her, so no, I don't have to be this tall, gorgeous, skinny, blonde thing. Probably still am, but anyway, that's just what I look like. But all of those wrong thinkings I began to debunk and replace them with what was right for me. So, and that was a long journey in itself. But for people living today who've had trauma, who've had domestic violence, who've had some sort of sexual violence and all of those things, we become that victim, but it becomes our reality. we need to give ourselves permission to look at the impact that had. Look at your thinking that is still perpetuating that in your life, and begin to explore it and reframe it. Reframe your stories, the elements and the events in your story that have shaped you. Go back and have a look, like I did for that morning. What really happened that morning? This man who had abused me, the fear came up. He had to silence me really quickly. And as a little girl, I'm their mummy. Help me, support me. As an older person, I could see that she was just as trapped as me, and she couldn't have done anything else other than be the person she was that morning. She was as afraid as him as I was. She didn't want to face the truth either. So she had her own lived agenda contributing to that experience. So she did nothing wrong at that point. But I took away from it. I just enveloped myself in, this is all because of me. And I had to undo that and say, no, it's not. You can free yourself from this now, and everything else that happened as a result of that. I could talk about this forever. You know that, don't you?
Yeah, Jenny, you and I have had more than a few cups of tea, and yes, I know you can. So from the listener's perspective, I'd love to learn. So we've identified that if your current situation, either health, mental or physical, is not where it could be, that perhaps maybe what's got you where you are is not necessarily what life is happening for you right now. It could be something in the past that you've masked, you've held down, and this dis-ease has created a disease. And that you need to give space between thought and action so that you can have that level of awareness to see what's happening for you. What some things that you could share with our listeners today that can help them move from where they are to where they want to be? Some lessons perhaps maybe from your book.
Let me see. The main one that stands out, because my book is actually divided into 3 parts. So the first part is excerpts from my life to give an appreciation of what that was and how it unfolded. Then the next 4 little short chapters are called Pearls of Wisdom. The first pearl of wisdom, and the standout for me was, as I've already indicated, is the relationships that we have. So my relationships at the time were ongoing, of course, with my parents, but it might be a relationship that you were in that was quite abusive and taught you that you were the wrong one, you were the awful one, you were the pathetic one, or whatever. And even though you've left that behind and moved forward, the impact of those messages you gained from that person is still living within you. So that's what I needed to do. And that's what I would share with people of domestic violence and traumas and sexual abuse now. What messages still live within you that were slammed into you at that time that you took on as truth? Do you need to identify? Do you need to break down, reframe, and create a different mantra around them instead of the one, and give yourself permission to do it and know it wasn't your fault? And as you change your thinking, look at your behaviors. You also need to catch yourself out. So when I went to OCD, a thought come in and I went to OCD. Whoa, catch yourself out. What's really happening there? Oh, I don't need to do OCD. I don't need to do that behavior. And that was a 2-year battle for me. And I do outline that in my book, how I overcame OCD and what I did in terms of my thinking to stop that behavior from happening. Medication didn't work. I had to do it. I found the way to do it. That's outlined in my book. And then, of course, you're just your physical body, like each day, you know, if there's a pain or something like that, okay, why are you here? What are you trying to share with me? What do you want me to know? What message are you trying to share so that I can refine this thing called recovery for me? And the other one is just the emotional load that you carry. Your emotions hold so much. But for listeners today, I strongly suggest that you find someone who works in this field and in this area. It's all right for me to come and say, go and do this, and then off you go and you try to do it. But you need someone there in your lane with you, guiding you through that process. Otherwise, it can just become a minefield and you just get as lost as you might, be at the moment. But unpacking your story with someone credible who has done the journey before you, because they'll understand every word that comes out of your mouth. And that's what Joan did for me. She was the first person who understood me. And that was a huge difference as well, to have someone in my court that got. So when the words came out and seemed ridiculous, I get it, because I've talked like you before. That's a real positive. So in sourcing help, do your homework. Ask other people, how does this person work? Ask that person, I'm about to pay you money. How do you work? I want to hear about what you're going to do for me, and then decide whether you align with that outcome or not. So I hope that's a helpful hint.
It is. It's fabulous. And we're sisters in OCD. I use mine now as a superpower, and it helps me get my things done. So, yeah, and for many years I was held prisoner by it. So whether or not we consider it cured or not cured, there are ways to look at the challenges that we have in life that we can still live a fully functioning life, full of abundance and love and everything else in between, whether we have physical ailments or mental, we're ably different mentally, that we can have this neurodiversity, that's the word I was looking for, so that we can live, live lives that make a difference for others. And that's exactly what you've done here, Jenny Lee, is by taking your experiences that spanned so many years, we won't give away the age because we're the same age, and sharing that in your beautiful book, allowing people to sort of see, and you've opened that wound and shared those intimate stories about how you got to where you were and how you unpacked it and then worked backwards to resolve the issues and create new patterns of thought and behavior, and share such golden gems and opportunities for other people to read the book and to move forward. So now, Jenny, could you maybe tell us a little bit about how we can get hold of the book, or maybe Rose can share a link as well? That would be great to tell us a little bit about the price point of the book, where we can get it and how we can get it and all of those things as well, Jenny Lee.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to do that. Just before I do, there was something that you said just then in your talking. You referenced patterns and threads, and that's another wisdom that I reference in my book. And I think I'd really like to highlight that as well, because it is the patterns and the threads of those patterns that we learn that need to be teased out, broken down, and reformed in a way that suits us. So for some reason, I just thought I needed to highlight that. My book, you can get it on Amazon.com, Anorexia Unlocked, Understanding Your Story Through Mine. However, it's just gone through a revamp. The story is exactly the same. I've just got it to what the coach that I've had that came in that happened to pick my book up and read it and went, I want this book up for awards. I want this book in libraries in every school in the planet. And so she actually connected with me and met me and said, look, I really want to promote your book for you. So we've gone through a revamp, getting it what she calls industry ready. So it will look basically the same, but it's just a little bit better than the self-publishing effort that I made. So I do have some copies at the moment. I'm quite happy to give the copies that I've got in my box here at home away for free. So if you email me at, there we are, going across the screen, hello@jlkeez.com.au. And if you're prepared to negotiate through my private business email there for a copy, and I can forward that to you, I'm quite happy to do that. Otherwise, the revamped one will probably be out around August, sometime when we've reformatted and recovered and all of those things that seem to take forever. Otherwise, go to my website, jlkeez.com.au. There is a link to the book there that tells you a bit more about the book, why I wrote it for you, and all of those little things that hopefully get you thinking and think this might be something that will assist me in my process out of here. So you can go to there as well and source it as an ebook or as a paperback.
I do love it, Jenny Lee. I'm just embarking as we speak in my self-publishing, and I'm going to tell you, I don't think this is the way to go. I'm about to turn heel and go the other way and just get someone else to take care of the details. It's time-consuming, and you can go down rabbit holes, and you can spend money on things you don't need to. So if you're listening today and you put books together, maybe reach out. That would be great to hear from you. Jenny?
Yeah, for me, self-publishing wasn't the issue. What became an issue when this book coach picked it up off someone's desk and read it and then connected with me. And then I learnt that next level of what grammar and consistency of grammar and structure and all of that, and what a book cover should have on it, for people to engage with you, and all of those important factors which I didn't know about. So they're the changes that I've made.
I love it, Jenny. Thank you so much for sharing everything that you've got here, and just with such an open heart, just so willing to step up and not only just share your book for free for those who want to negotiate through your email, but also just to share your story and your learnings. And you just bring a beautiful warmth whenever you come to a conversation. And I really appreciate spending quality time with you, Jenny. Thank you also for stepping in and attending our Healing Through Love Pamper Day in May. And I really am looking forward to hopefully that you joining us again next year in May when we do the Adelaide one. It'll be so great to have you there. And we've got some new initiatives that we're looking at in the next one where we've got reading rooms and all sorts of other things for authors. So it would be great to have you in that space. Jenny Lee, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for sharing everything that you have. And we're going to call Rose back on now. Thanks, Jenny Lee. Thank you so much. And Rose is about to join us, and we'd love to talk about, hello, Rose, how are you? Like magic, you just pop onto the screen. Rose, could you just tell our beautiful listeners a little bit more about what's happening in the preparations for our Tasmanian Man's Retreat? I can't hear you, Rose. You're on mute. That's okay. She's plugging herself in. She's been very busy typing. Now we can hear her.
Beautiful. I am negotiating with some gentlemen who have previously run retreats, and they're giving me some hints and ideas on how I could move forward with this. I certainly won't be facilitating it. I will be getting some other men to come in and do that. But so we're looking at having a men's circle with a talking stick or a talking stone, where you just pass it around and it's your turn to to speak and to tell your truth, basically. So yeah, looking forward to that. It's going to be probably somewhere in Cradle Mountain, I'm hoping, because it's beautiful up there, and there's a lot of walking tracks up there, so that will fill in some of your time. Yeah, so it'll be fully catered, and and it'll be lots to do. It'll be for a weekend, so from Saturday, it will be Saturday and Sunday, and probably arrive Friday night, which will be really good. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. And for our local listeners here in Adelaide, if you yourself are a survivor, or if you have a family member who is a survivor of family or domestic violence, our next amazing event is going to be in May, and we're a bit excited about that. We're looking for a new location, a bigger location, because we were just too big for the last place. So we need something that's got more rooms and more facilities, and we've got more businesses coming on board. If you're today listening and you are a business, and you yourself either are a survivor or there's a place in your heart to make a difference for people who are, and you want to pay it forward, we're looking for businesses to supply services for our next Pamper Day and pay it forward and make a difference. In between time, we're preparing pamper packs during these cold months for ladies who have escaped, and we're making sure they go to the front line and giving to the girls on their leaving, so that they've actually got something that they can pamper themselves with, personal care items. So get hold of Rose or myself, and we'll make sure they get to the right locations as we're continuing to prepare these pamper packs. That's it for us today. It's been a privilege and a pleasure to spend quality time with you, and such a lovely offer from Jenny Lee to give her book away for free, and all you need to do is email her. So thank you so much for watching Healing Through Love. We'll see you again this time next week. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.